So, you know where we left off? Magician's Nephew, midway through Diggory and His Uncle, Chapter 2. Let's reverse a little bit. I bet she was a bad fairy, thought Diggory, and added aloud, But what about Polly? Oh, how you do harp on that, said Uncle Andrew, as if it would have mattered. My first task was, of course, to study the box itself. It was very ancient, and I knew enough even to know that it wasn't Greek or ancient. It was very ancient, and I knew enough to know that it wasn't Greek or Old Egyptian or Babylonian or Hittite or even Chinese. It was older than any of those nations. It was a great deal at last that I found that the truth. The box was Atlantean. It came from the lost island of Atlantis. And for some reason this old Englishman sounds like Deckard Cain. Oh no. Stay a while and listen. I swear I'm a grown person. That it meant it was centuries older than any of those Stone Age things they dig up in Europe. They dig up in Europe, and it wasn't enough crude thing like them either. For in the very dawn of time, Atlantis was already a great city with palaces and temples and learned men. He paused for a moment as if he expected Diggory to say something, but Diggory was disliking his uncle every minute, so he said nothing. Meanwhile, continued Uncle Andrew, I was learning a good deal in other ways. It wouldn't be proper to explain to a child about magic in general. That meant I came to have a fair idea of what sort of things might be in the box. By various tests, I narrowed down the possibilities to get to know some, devilishly weird people, to go through some very disagreeable experiences. That was what turned my head grey. Oh, one doesn't become a magician for nothing. My health broke down in the end, but I got better. Well, at last I actually knew. Although there was not really the least chance of anyone overhearing them, he leaned forward and almost whispered as he said, The Atlantean books contained something that had been brought from another world, when our world was only just beginning. What? Asked Diggory, who was now interested in spite of himself. Only dust, said Uncle Andrew. Fine, dry dust. Nothing much to look at, nothing much to show for a lifetime of toil, you might say. But when I looked at the dust, I jolly took care not to touch it, and thought that every grain had once been in another world. I don't mean another planet, you know. They're part of another world. You could get to them if you went far enough, but really other world, another nature, other universe, somewhere you could never reach, even if you traveled through space of universe forever and ever. A world that could only be reached by magic. Here Uncle Andrew rubbed his hands together until his knuckles cracked like fireworks. I knew, he went on, that if you could only get to it into the right form, that the dust would draw you back into the right place it had come from. But the difficulty was to get it into the right form. My earlier experiments were all failures. I tried them on guinea pigs. Some of them only died. Some exploded like little bombs. What's a jolly cruel thing to do, said Diggory, who had once had a guinea pig of his own. How do you keep getting off the point, said Uncle Andrew. That's what creatures are for. I'd bought them myself. Let me see, where was I? Oh, yes. Well, at last I succeeded in making the rings, the yellow rings. But now a new difficulty arose. I was pretty sure that now that the yellow ring would send any creature it touched into the other place. But what would be the good if I couldn't get them back? Well, tell me, what if they had found what had they found there? What was the good if I couldn't get them back to tell me what they had found there? There we go. And what about them? Said Diggory. A nice mess they'd be in if they couldn't get back. Well, you kept on looking at everything from the wrong point of view, said Uncle Andrew with a long look of impatience. Can't you understand that the thing is a great experiment? Why, the whole point of sending anyone to the other place is that I want to find out what it's like. Well, why don't you go for yourself then? Said Diggory. Diggory had hardly ever seen anyone look so surprised and offended as his uncle did at this simple question. Me? Me? He exclaimed. The boy must be mad. Well, a man in my time of life. At my state of health, to risk the shock and the dangers of being flung suddenly into a different universe. I never heard anything so preposterous in all my life. Do you realize what you're saying? Think another world means you might meet anything. And suppose you've set Polly into it then, said Diggory. His cheeks were flaming with anger. All I can say, he added, even if you are my uncle, well, that is, you've behaved like a coward, sending a girl to a place you're afraid to go yourself. Silence, sir, said Uncle Andrew, bringing his hands down on the table. I will not be talked to like that by a little dirty schoolboy. You don't understand. Well, I'm the great scholar, the magician, the adept who's doing the experiment. Of course, I need subjects to do it on. Well, bless my soul, you'll be telling me next I ought to have asked the guinea pigs' permission before I used them. No, great wisdom can't be reached without sacrifice, but the idea of my going in myself is ridiculous. Well, that's like asking a general to fight as a common soldier. Suppose I got killed. What would become of my life's work? Oh, do stop jawing, said Diggory. Are you going to bring Polly back? Well, I was going to tell you when you so rudely interrupted me, said Uncle Andrew, that I did find at last a way of doing just the return journey. The green rings draw you back. But Polly hasn't got a green ring. No, said Uncle Andrew with a very cruel smile. Then she can't get back. Then she can't get back, shouted Diggory. I don't have that accent, said Uncle Andrew. If someone else would go after her, and it's exactly the same as if you'd murdered her. Well, she can get back, said Uncle Andrew. If only someone else would go after her, wearing a yellow ring himself, taking 2 green rings, 1 ring to bring himself back, and 1 to bring her back. And now, of course, Diggory saw the trap in which he was caught, and he stared at Uncle Andrew, saying nothing, with his mouth open wide. His cheeks had gone very pale. Oh no, not the breathiness. Oh, stop it, Ivy. Okay. I hope, said Uncle Andrew presently in a very high and mighty voice, just as if he were a perfect uncle who had given a handsome tip and some good advice. I hope, Diggory, that you are not giving to showing the white feather. Well, I should be very sorry to think any one of our family had not enough honour and chivalry to go to the aid of a lady in distress. Oh, shut up, said Diggory. If you had any honour in it at all, you'd be going in yourself. But you won't. All right, I see I've got to go, but you are a beast. I suppose you planned the whole thing, so that she'd go without knowing, and then I'd have to go in after her. Well, of course, said Uncle Andrew with a hateful smile. Very well, I'll go. But there's one thing I jolly well mean to say first. Well, I don't believe in magic till today. I see now it's real. Well, if it is, well, I suppose all the fairy tales are more or less true, and you're just simply a wicked, cruel magician like the ones in the stories. Well, I've never read a story in which in which people of that sort aren't paid out in the end, and I bet you will be, and serve you right. Of all the things Diggory said, that this was the first one that really hit home. Of all the things that Diggory said, this was the first thing that really hit home. Uncle Andrew stared. Uncle Andrew started, and there came over his face such a look of horror that, a beast though he was, you could almost feel sorry for him. But a second later he had smoothed it all away with a rather forced laugh. Well, I suppose that is a natural thing for a child to think. Brought up among women, as you've been. Oh, wives' tales, eh? I didn't think you need to worry about my danger, Diggory. Well, wouldn't it be better to worry about the danger of your little friend? She's been gone for some time. There are any dangers over there? Well, it would be a pity to arrive a moment too late. A lot you care, said Diggory fiercely, but I'm sick of this jaw. Well, what have I got to do? You really must learn to control that temper of yours, my boy, said Uncle Andrew coolly. Otherwise, you'll grow up like your Aunt Letty. Now, attend to me. He got up and put on a pair of gloves, and he walked over to the tray that contained the rings. They only work, he said, if they're actually touching your skin. So, wearing gloves, I can pick them up like this, and nothing happens. Well, if you carried one in your pocket, nothing would happen. But, of course, you'd have to be careful not to put your hand in your pocket and touch it by accident. The moment you touch a yellow ring, you vanish right out of this world. When you're in the other place, or I expect, of course, this hasn't been tested yet, but I expect that the moment you touch the green ring, you'll vanish out of that world, and I expect you'd rather appear in this one. Well, now I take these 2 green rings, I drop them into your right hand pocket. Remember carefully which pockets the green rings are in. G for green and R for right. G-R, you see, which are the first 2 letters of green. One for you and one for the little girl. And now pick up your yellow one for yourself. I should put it on your finger. If I were you, then there'd be less chance of dropping it. Diggory almost picked up the yellow ring when he suddenly checked himself. Look here, he said. What about Mother? Suppose she asks where I am? Well, the sooner you go, the sooner you'll be back, said Uncle Andrew cheerfully. But you really don't know whether I can get back. Uncle Andrews shrugged his shoulders and walked across to the door and unlocked it and threw it open and said, "Oh, very well, just as you please. Go down and have your dinner. Leave the little girl to be eaten by wild animals, or drowned, or starved in the other world, or lost there for good. Or if that's what you prefer, it's all one to me. Perhaps in tea time you'd better drop in on Mrs. Plummer and explain that she'll never see her daughter again, because you were afraid to put on a ring." "By gum," said Diggory, Didn't I just wish I was big enough to punch your head?" Then he buttoned up his coat and took a deep breath and picked up the ring. And he thought then that, as he always thought afterwards too, that he could not decently have done anything else. And now we're at the end of Magician's Nephew, Chapter 2. Next up is
What do we have here? It says chapter 3 is the woods between the roads. The trick scissors.
Anyway, it's been a pleasure. Yeah. Yes, he's asleep. All right, time for another night. Oh no, my bookmark. Oh, we lost it. Oh, we're still recording. Alright, peace, love, and hairspray. Love you all. Good night. And by all, I mean me. Because, hey, this is fun, and I really don't think anybody's actually listening to this all the way to the end. You've logged off by now if you actually touched this button. This does hurt. So, maybe I'll hear it later. It doesn't hurt, like, physically. Emotionally, it hurts. Like, I know I don't sound the way I need to sound, but I will.